Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over Chandra Dressed to Kill, the brand new Chandra introduced from Innistrad Crimson Vow. So, let's get into it. Chandra Dressed to Kill is a brand new mono-red Planeswalker. She has the usual 3 abilities that our Planeswalkers have, and she has one of those spanking new passive abilities. Hers is called Burning Youth, and Burning Youth is going to make it so that when you cast a red card, you deal 1 damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, and you gain 3 experience points. This passive definitely makes this Planeswalker, because she needs experience for a number of her abilities, and gaining 3 experience from every single card that has red in its color identity that you cast makes it so that you're able to gain experience much more quickly. Her first ability, Flame On, is going to have you draw a card. You gain 2 experience points. The first red card in your hand gains 7 mana. If your opponent has a Vanguard, then that Vanguard loses 1 shield, and if they don't, then you're going to deal 10 damage directly to your opponent's Planeswalker. So, if your opponent does not have a Vanguard in their hand, then Chandra Dressed to Kill's first ability is able to provide you with a tremendous amount of tempo, because you're drawing a card, you're giving mana to your hand, and you're dealing 10 damage directly to your opponent. You get cards, you get mana, and you do damage. So, absolutely phenomenal first ability. And that's not even including the fact that it also gives you experience. Her second ability, Burn the Midnight Oil, is going to have you discard a card. Then you pick one of the first 4 spell cards from your library and fetch that card. It gains Outcast, meaning that you either need to cast it that turn, or it's going to be exiled from your hand at end of turn. That card is going to gain mana equal to your experience points. Then you're going to lose X experience points, where X is half the base cost of the last card in your hand, rounded up. So you're going to pick a spell, it's going to gain mana equal to your experience, and then you're going to lose experience equal to half of the cost of that spell, is basically how Burn the Midnight Oil is going to work. So if you're using this second ability, you're using it with the understanding that you're taking a card that has a mana cost that is less than or equal to your experience, so that you're going to be able to cast it that turn. Because if you can't cast it that turn, it's just going to get exiled from your hand. Finally, the third ability on Chandra Dressed to Kill is Fiery Gown. You're going to create a Fiery Gown token. That Fiery Gown token is a red support emblem that is legendary. It has 4 shields, and when you cast a red card, or a card with Outcast is exiled from your hand, you're going to deal 3 damage to any opposing target. Then you're going to gain experience points equal to the amount of mana you have in your hand. Then you're going to discard your hand. Then you're going to fetch the first 6 different cards from your library. You're going to give all of them Outcast, and then you're going to gain mana equal to Chandra's experience. Now, I know that I stated the ability differently than it reads, but that's just because I think that it's an easier way to understand how the ability works. So when you pop the ability, you're going to immediately gain experience equal to the amount of mana in your hand. You're going to discard your hand. You're going to fetch 6 different cards from your library, the first 6 different ones. And then the cards in your hand are going to gain mana equal to your experience. It says transfer your experience as mana, which makes it seem like you're losing that experience, but you don't actually lose your experience when you use the third ability. The only thing that's going to take away your experience is your second ability, Burn the Midnight Oil. So just keep that in mind if you wind up picking her up and playing with her. Her mana bonuses are pretty exceptional. She's got +7 to red. She's got +3 to both green and black. And then she has -2 to both blue and white. I found from my playtesting with Chandra Dressed to Kill that she's a Planeswalker that you're really going to want to either spam your first ability for tempo, or you're going to want to just cast a bunch of cards, build up to your third ability, and use that to boom boom goes the dynamite, kill your opponent. The third ability is absolutely able to win you games, And the first ability is absolutely able to keep your deck gelling and functioning and making it actually run very smoothly. Chandra Dressed to Kill is going to pair really nicely with a few different cards that we have currently in Standard. My favorite card that Chandra is going to pair with is going to be Rem Carolus Stalwart Slayer. And that's because Chandra's passive is going to make it so that anytime you cast any red card, you deal 1 damage directly to your opponent. And Rem makes it so that whenever anything that you control deals damage to your opponent's going to take 2 extra damage. So basically, anytime that you cast any red card, you're going to then go ahead and deal 3 damage to your opponent if you have both Chandra and Rem. If you have Chandra's third ability down with the Fiery Gown, it's going to make it so that when you cast any red card from your hand, then you cast the card, then the Fiery Gown is going to deal 3 damage directly to your opponent. Rem is going to deal 2 damage to your opponent because Fiery Gown did 3. Chandra's passive is going to deal 1 damage to your opponent, and then Rem is going to deal an additional 2 more. So you wind up making it so that anytime you cast any red card, that you're going to deal 8 damage to your opponent. Alternatively, you could have the Fiery Gown get rid of your opponent's creatures. You could use it to remove their board state, but I've wound up liking using it just as a way of pinging my opponent directly for casting spells. So I say spells, but that's more of a paper magic thing, I guess, in Puzzle Quest, casting cards, right? Because it's any red card. Another card that I really found that I liked a lot with this Planeswalker was Rite of Flame, because Rite of Flame is a really cheap card in that it's going to cost very little mana, and then it's going to give a bunch of mana to cards in your hand. So it's going to make it so you're going to cast more spells, and remember that, cast more cards, and that whenever you cast a card, that you're going to gain 3 experience, right? Whenever you cast a red card, you're going to gain 3 experience. So this is going to make it so that you're going to be able to build up your experience a lot more quickly with Chandra, and that's definitely very important. The last one that I wanted to point out that's really fun for this deck is Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, because if you have Valakut, Valakut is going to deal damage directly to your opponent's Planeswalker with the whenever you convert 3 or more gems to red. And so Valakut, in addition to Rem, is just going to make it so that you've got all these different sources that are going to be pinging your opponent. You're going to be doing a whole bunch of like little increment extra damage to your opponent, but you're doing so many of those pings to your opponent that you're going to find that you're able to wipe out your opponents fairly quickly if you have Rem Carolus. One of the really nice things about Rem is that Rem does have a full art variant. So if you do wind up picking up this Planeswalker, or you have picked up this Planeswalker, you can try and keep an eye out from Fibblethip's findings and potentially pick up this card. It is absolutely a card that I would use in conjunction with Chandra. So for the gameplay portion of this, I want to show you all how Chandra plays. I have a sort of Pauper Plus deck, I think, that I wanted to show you guys. And then I also, or just actually maybe it's just regular Pauper. And then I have a deck that includes some mythics and masterpieces. So let's go ahead and get into that gameplay. This first match is going to be my Pauper deck. And so the idea with running Chandra when you don't have access to the best cards in the game is you're probably just going to want to go ahead and get off her first ability as often as you can. The first ability is going to serve as a pseudo win con for you. It just gives you so much between the mana and the card draw and the damage directly to your opponent. You're definitely going to want to try and use that ability as much as possible. Now, in this particular match, I'm up against a really terrifying deck. It's a new Puzzle Masters Liliana, and the player that I'm playing against absolutely has access to a lot of the strongest cards in the game. So you'll see that I'm going to go ahead and use my first ability. You'll see that I get 2 experience. I deal 10 damage directly to my opponent, and then I give 7 mana to that first red card in my hand. So I wanted to try and boost some removal up a little bit higher in my hand, which is what I did there. I got a bit lucky there. I did get a 5 match, which definitely helped. I am, as I said, up against a pretty scary deck. So I'm going to use the Explosive Welcome to get rid of my opponent's critter. It's going to get rid of the critter. It's going to ping my opponent. You'll see that the casting of this spell wound up doing extra damage Well, it did extra damage to Liliana because of the ability of Chandra Dressed to Kill. And then here I'm lucky in that I have another 5 match right there. So if I want, I can actually go ahead and use my first ability again here. I've already done 10 damage to my opponent with my first ability this match. So in using my first ability here again, that's going to be 20 damage to my opponent if I so choose to do that. But here I definitely want to try and get myself a little bit more conversion. I've already got one red converter on the battlefield. So here I want to try and get a second red converter onto the battlefield. I do desperately need to get rid of my opponent's Gisa, though. That thing absolutely has to go. It's a major problem for me here because Gisa, if she winds up giving her zombie tokens decayed, then it's absolutely going to wreck me. It's going to do terrible, terrible things to me. So here I think I make an absolutely dreadful mistake. I could have actually played both of my little vigilant first strike critters, but I just forgot in the match that that Chandra had a +7 to red, and so I could have actually gone and taken out more of my opponent's critters potentially. It didn't quite work out that way, but that's okay. So things are looking progressively more dire for me because, as you can see, my opponent has some pretty nasty things on the board between Gisa and then the zombies as a 10-8. So here, I do have Scavenged Blade. Scavenged Blade is going to power up Halna, but nonetheless, I'm still not feeling too great about the position that I'm in here. So I could actually make the red into black into red match, and in doing so, that would make it so that I'd also wind up getting some loyalty instead of taking the red landfall. So I'm absolutely going to do that. I'd rather try and get more loyalty so I can spam off my first ability a little bit more. Like I said, it's a great way of keeping you in a match. It's a great way of maintaining tempo. So I'm going to get 2 of my little elementals down. And so my opponent plays a Tainted Adversary. They wind up draining mana from their hand, and thank goodness my opponent does not have room for the tokens, and Greg does not choose to replace anything with those tokens. That would have been really bad for me. But this also puts me in a scary position because if I kill anything except for if I kill anything except for the Tainted Adversary, and then my opponent winds up playing another Tainted Adversary, then my opponent would just get so many zombie tokens. I don't even know that there's anything I could do to try and stop them from killing me. So that would actually be really, really bad. So I've got Introduction to Annihilation right there in my hand. I could make the red landfall over here, or alternatively, I could actually take that green into black match that's up top. I actually just wind up messing up a little bit. Again, I don't do that, but it's not the end of the world. I'm going to go ahead and Introduction to Annihilation here. And so that's just really me hoping that my opponent does not have another Tainted Adversary in their hand. And then they do, but I once again get really lucky in that they only got 6 mana. So they weren't able to actually get more zombie tokens because you have to actually drain mana in order for the Tainted Adversary to do that. So here I use my first ability again. I've now done 30 damage to my opponent with my first ability, not to forget about any of the other mana that I've gained that way. I'm going to play another one of my elementals. This one's coming out as a really, really big guy. I'm going to have my Pyre Spawn deal an extra 3 damage to Liliana. And you'll see that I'm slowly but surely chunking Liliana away. And so here comes even more of the baddies. My opponent is playing a very mythic heavy deck centered around zombies, but that's okay. The Gisa Glorious Resurrector is definitely not something that I really want to see. Fortunately, it's based on things being in my exile, so I don't need to be overly afraid of it, but it also is still something that I don't really want to see. So I'm gonna freeze that down. I'm gonna let my elemental swing into it to get rid of it. I'd rather save my exile just in case another Tainted Adversary comes out. And of course, my opponent winds up playing yet another one of those Gisas. So I'm not out of the woods just yet. I am able to Spike Fuel Hazard to get rid of the zombie token. And then here I might as well actually consider the idea of using the Introduction to Annihilation so that my elemental swings directly into Liliana. And then in doing so, if I play the Infectious Bloodlust, then that means that I win next turn if my opponent does not play another creature. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the zombie token stack right there. Or I guess it's just one zombie. And then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the Gisa there. I'm going to give Infectious Bloodlust to my Elemental, which is going to deal damage directly to Liliana, and put her in the exact range needed to kill her. Unfortunately for me, my opponent does play a zombie token, so I'm not going to be able to get rid of them necessarily this turn, but I do have access to my first ability here, so I can actually go ahead, use my first ability. You'll see that I threw away the saw. That was just in case I drew a removal card. I wanted to try and make it so that if I drew a removal card, that I could just give all the mana to it and then take out the Liliana here. So let's see, my opponent is at 8, so my opponent's going to take 4 here from the Elemental, because when it loses power, it winds up dealing damage equal to the damage it took to your opponent. And so I want to say that I've done 40 damage directly to my opponent here using just my first ability. And so here I could have just used my first ability to do 50 and end the match. But I wanted to, of course, go ahead and play one more card before doing that. So that is the end of Liliana. That's the end of my opponent. And that is the Pauper deck. This next match is my more collection-heavy match. And so the goal with this one is to try and get Rem Carlos down as quickly as possible. If you don't get Rem down, that's fine. The alternative goal is to then just try and play as many red cards as possible. So this particular type of deck, I find that it's better to aim for your third ability. So I actually really like trying to shoot for a deck. If I don't have as strong of cards, I want to just spam my first ability, because I'm going to get more out of drawing cards, gaining mana, and doing damage directly to my opponent. Whereas if I have better cards at my disposal, then I find that I would rather try and aim to use my third ability to try and maximize the cards that I've put into my deck. So just some basic thinking about what it is that you'd want to do if you picked up the Planeswalker and how you'd want to play her. So I've already got 2 different gem converters that are going to convert 3 to red for me, which is really good. And then I definitely want to get the Efreet Flame Painter down, because I used the Valakut Awakening to throw 2 Alchemist's Gambits into my graveyard. So that means that the Flame Painter is going to be able to bring back 2 free Alchemist Gambits for me. And I definitely want to get those free Alchemist Gambits. So my opponent seems to have a pretty good deck between the Den of the Bugbear running Conversion and then Dak, which is a very scary Vanguard. But that's okay. I feel like I'm still in a pretty good position in this match. So I'm going to go ahead and play my Flame Painter here. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the Valakut down. I'm going to go ahead and cast this Alchemist's Gambit as well. Remember that the more things that I cast, the better. There I was just checking on my loyalty, and I was close enough, or I was far enough away from my third that I figured with the conversion that I have at my disposal, it's probably in my best interest to just use my first ability there again. And so unfortunately, there is a 5 match for my opponent. I'm just going to have to hope that my opponent doesn't take it. And they don't, which is good. My opponent plays a spell which actually steals my Efreet Flame Painter. And so now here you'll see that I'm actually a little bit behind. So Chandra can feel like a little bit deceptive at times. Like you can feel like you're deceptively behind just because of how little health she starts with. She has 97 health to start with, which is actually a fairly low amount. It can make it a little bit difficult at times. So here I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get the Prismatic Bridge down, which is really good. And then my Flame Painter is going to get rid of my opponent's Goblin token. But my opponent is going to be getting one every turn because of the Den of the Bugbear. So I am in a position where I will definitely want to find a way to get rid of that in some way so that I can use... so I can actually use the Flame Painter to get me cards back from my graveyard. So there is a pretty sweet match there for me, and it's going to enable me to play the Alchemist's Gambit. And so you'll see that this is just going to keep boosting up my experience. I've got 2 extra swaps, which means I can safely go for that red into loyalty match right there. And then fortunately for me, there's another loyalty into red match that is going to get me to my third. So You'll see that my Efreet Flame Painter now has Trample thanks to the Alchemist's Gambit, and that's going to enable me to pull 2 more of the Alchemist's Gambits back from my graveyard. So here I could just go ahead and use my 3rd ability straight away, but that would actually be a mistake. So I'm going to bring Velomachus onto the battlefield, and then I'm actually going to go ahead and cast both of these Alchemist's Gambits here, because I want them to be giving me as much experience as possible. And so I actually get really lucky with that loyalty match and not getting any mana, because I'm able to use the Valakut's Awakening, which is also going to enable me to use the Rite of Flame. And then I've got my 2 extra swaps here. So I've actually got a whole ton of experience. And so here you'll see I'm going to use my 3rd ability. I gain 6. And then look at that. Look at all of that mana that I get into my hand. And luckily for me, I also get a Rem Carolus right there. So this match is definitely over. You'll see that Nahiri really doesn't stand a chance against me now. So Rem is going to come down. And then as Rem comes down, I'm going to ping for 3 with the Gown. It's going to ping 2 for Rem. It's going to ping 1 more from my passive and ping 2 more from Rem. So I'm just going to have all the fiery Gowns hit my opponent. So my opponent's going to take 8 more from that one. I'm going to let my opponent take yet another 8 there. The Magnum Opus is going to hit my opponent for 15, and then another 8 after the 15 for a total of 23. And then my Velomachus, I get another Fiery Gown trigger, which puts my opponent down to 4. And then this is going to be game over if I wind up playing really anything else. So I don't know. Do I have enough matches here? Maybe. I know that Chandra doesn't particularly like white matches or blue matches, so I am pretty lucky there. I do get a red match. It's going to bring down the Flame Painter, and that is going to end the match. So Chandra's going to take this. Right, and here he's going to take the damage, and that's game over. And that's the gameplay with Chandra. In conclusion, Chandra is actually a lot better than I thought she would be. Her passive absolutely makes her. When we first saw Chandra, we didn't see her passive. I was like, oof. Her first ability is really good, but her 2nd and 3rd abilities are just both complete swing and a miss abilities. So with that said, her 3rd ability is actually way better than I thought it would be. Not losing the experience and having that passive give you 3 experience every time that you cast a red card makes it really easy to get a lot out of her 3rd ability, between being able to play a bunch of cards and deal a bunch of direct damage to your opponent or to burn away their creatures. But all of that said, I found that Chandra was really more of a fun walker than she is like a top tier walker. So I do think that she is good. She's definitely passable. I've really enjoyed playing with her. But in terms of where I would place her on my tier list, I'm going to go ahead and place her for now in the C tier. I think there's a very solid argument for someone to say that maybe she could move up to the B tier if I played her enough, and I felt pretty strongly that she was still holding her own. But that said, I really don't think that she has as much power as, for example, Zerial potentially has. As for Chandra, A Weakened Inferno, I think it's actually it's pretty close between the 2 of them. It's really close. But I just need to play with her more to determine if she moves up to B or if she stays in C. But I think it's safe to say that that this Chandra right here is somewhere in between the B and C tiers. Once I play her a little bit more, she'll settle. She might wind up being a Planeswalker that moves up to the B tier. She might be a Planeswalker that just stays in the C tier. So I really want to thank Octagon for sending me this Planeswalker. I know I'm waiting here until the end. I should have mentioned it a little bit earlier, but Octagon actually went and sent me all of the Planeswalkers for the Innistrad Crimson Vow set. So I will be making reviews on all of the Planeswalkers from this set. So Chandra, Kaya, and then also Sorin. So that's really all that I have for our brand new Chandra Dressed to Kill. She's absolutely a fun walker. If you wanted to pick her up, or if you're thinking about picking her up, I would say that she's definitely very, very fun. I've had a lot more fun with her than I expected. She's not going to replace any of my other mono walkers that I use in events, but I'm glad that I have her, and I've gotten to play her for, I've probably gotten about 10 hours out of her. So thank you so much for watching. and I'll see you in the next one.